Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got an interesting podcast for you today. Going to go a little off script because we're going to change things up a little bit going forward. So what we've decided as a group, and I'll introduce the group here in just a second, but what we've decided as a group is that we're going to do two types of IGEL podcasts. We're going to do one that's centered and its origins come from the IGEL corporate blog site, which is the original idea. And then the second one that we're going to do is going to be every other week, which is going to be based off the IGEL community. We had Doug on a couple weeks ago. We had some good conversations around the community, and it kind of highlighted the fact that there's a lot of good stuff happening there. And having Doug and some of his cohorts on would be a great way to build out the podcast schedule and to get some livelier content on, as well as what the original plan was. So with that, I have my weekly co-host, Chris Feeney on. Chris is the local sales engineer for IGEL here in the Carolinas and beyond. Chris, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm excited about today's lineup. Let's get going.
Yeah, it's a Tuesday. We usually do these on Tuesday, right? We didn't have to move this one around, did we?
No, this one's on schedule.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. And we also have with us the community leader over at IGEL, Doug Brown. Doug is a long-term podcaster, blogger, as we talked about in the last episode. Doug, how's it going over in Germany this week?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. I can't complain. So the weather's snowing today, which is beautiful out.
So yeah, and we've talked a little bit. I don't understand I don't know the climates in Germany. I know it doesn't get too hot and doesn't get too cold. Is that right?
That's correct. Pretty much. I come from the Midwest where, here in Celsius, it's 1 degree. Well, that's like 32, 33 degrees outside. And that's a pleasant day in the Midwest at this time of year. So I don't consider it cold at all. And the summertime doesn't get too cold. We don't have air conditioning here, which is for an American, like, wait a second, what do you mean you don't have air conditioning?
Yeah.
So, but you really don't need it. There's a couple of weeks a year that you might need it, and you curse the sky for not having it. But for the most part, the weather here is pretty good. It's always gloomy and doomy, which I absolutely adore.
Well, that makes sense when you stop and think about the population bases around the world and where people, migrated to for reasons, pre-air conditioning. It would make a lot of sense that you could live in a place that was somewhat moderate year round and not freeze to death and not burn up either.
Well, one thing people don't realize, and I didn't realize it, maybe people do, but one thing I didn't realize is how north Berlin is. Mm-hmm. So you could tell by just when it gets dark and when it gets light. And we're quite a bit way up the earth compared to, let's say, Des Moines, which is, if you look at the U.S., it's more on the upper half of the country. So yeah.
Well, and so for some of our lesser informed IGEL listeners out there, the reason we're having this conversation because IGEL has its roots in Germany, and Doug, maybe as part of this podcast, we tell a little bit about the IGEL story along the way. That might be another great way to kind of indoctrinate people in the IGEL world that maybe are newer to it or maybe have been playing with the tech but don't really understand the history of the company.
I've been with the company this month is 4 years, which is amazing. It seems like just a couple years. Sebastian, which you'll introduce in a second, he's been with the company, I think, 7+. So he could probably tell the story a lot better than I can.
Okay.
I know the new IGEL, post JED.
Yeah,
Sebastian's seen it for quite many iterations of the growth within this great thing we call IGEL.
Yeah, speaking of JED, I saw a video pop up on my LinkedIn. Something I think I knew he was converting his attic in San Francisco into a studio. Us technical guys, we get together and we throw this podcast together every week, and we do what we do. You historically have done that and done it better than what I'm doing here, but I'm just happy to get out what I get out. And then you got Jed, who looks like he's putting together a full-blown movie in his attic every week.
In his guest house.
We're not going to disclose how much money was spent on that attic renovation, by the way.
Yeah, it's actually his guest house. I'm pretty sure I could be wrong, but guest house. You see him walking in, and it's like, wow, that's nice.
Yeah. So our budget over here for the IGEL Weekly podcast is a little lower than his, I'm sure. All right, well, let's introduce our guest. So again, the idea is we're going to go every other week with a corporate podcast, and the other week we're going to go with an IGEL community podcast. And in the IGEL community podcast, we're going to get technical. And we brought on a guest here today and going to join us at least for the community podcast, I think, Sebastian Perusat, right? Perusat.
Absolutely awesome.
I really slowed that down and probably screwed it up more than I had to. But Sebastian's going to be our go-to technologist as it comes to these IGEL community podcasts, because some of them are going to get deeper than Doug and Chris and I can go on behalf of our listeners. And we know at some point we want to do that. So what I'm really highlighting there is for the community podcast, we're going to get technical sometimes. We're going to talk about Kerberos, and we're going to talk about ticket issuing systems and ticket granting systems, and Doug and Chris and I could probably go about one layer deep on that, but then we're going to have Sebastian here to dig in and help explain what the author was getting into. So Sebastian, it sounds like you've been at IGEL for longer than any of us have been around it. So 7-8 years.
7 years, more or less. Yes, I joined, I think it was in 2014 at the beginning, I guess. And I joined IGEL in Mainz, which is more or less in the mid of Germany. It was the first office outside of Bremen and Augsburg. It was the first time that IGEL expanded in other regions than in the south and north, and obviously in other countries. And I joined in the pre-sales team, was a sales guy which left IGEL already. But it was an amazing time because we had to build up a new relationship with new partners, customers in that mid-Germany, which is also Frankfurt am Main for those who already landed there on a plane travel. And it was an amazing time. After 7 years, more or less, in the pre-sales team, jumping over the enterprise pre-sales team, now in part of the community, I spent, I would say, more or less 3 years supporting Doug and other people on answering questions, doing meetups, etc. But I'm pretty excited. The first time I'm joining a podcast. So if I'm doing something wrong, if I'm telling too much, not enough, just push me.
Yeah, no worries. We'll kind of guide you through it, but there's nothing to it, right? We're pretty easy to get along with here. The only key here is I got a busy calendar and a busy schedule. So as we get closer to the top of the hour mark, I'll start to wrap things up in mid-sentence because that's just two things. One, I don't want the listeners to have to listen too long to us ramble about stuff. Hopefully they're enjoying it. And two, podcasting is my side hobby, and I've got 5 or 6 of them a week now. So it's starting to become something that takes effort, but I love doing it, and I think there's value to the folks. Hey, Sebastian, why don't you tell us how you wound up at IGEL? I challenge people all the time, Doug and Chris, and I even challenge myself. Why are you an IGEL guy? It's just a Linux thin client operating system. If I would have told myself that I would be doing anything exciting around a thin client solution 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years ago, I would have said, no way, that's boring. What drives you to be an IGEL guy?
I would say I would split the answer in 2 sections. What drove me to join IGEL and what driving me again at the moment to drive the community together with Doug. When I joined IGEL, to be absolutely honest, I was a purely Windows guy. So we had thin clients. We had thin clients from other vendors. We had thin clients from IGEL too. So I was a customer for about 10 or 12 years approximately in the end-user computing shop that we had at the moment. And it was purely Windows. So we had NT4 embedded. We had all that Vista embedded and 7 embedded. And to be honest, the end-user computing stuff was exciting from the beginning on, because you had the end user who wanted specific tasks that wanted to be achieved. You had special requests, new technologies that needed to be implemented. And that's the jumping point where I'm seeing the old IGEL and the new IGEL. The old IGEL was really purely a thin client vendor with a cool software installed on it. It could be Windows, it could be Linux, and one management platform with some specific modules that you could add or not. But we didn't have this kind of marketing strategy we have at the moment, where we refocused totally on software, on integrating new partner solutions, unified communication solution. All that stuff was done, let's say, in a less professional way that we are doing it at the moment. So that's what driving me at the moment still to stay in this end-user computing, this end-user operating system part of the company.
Hey, Sebastian, I'm going to ask you a question on that real quick. Does your world of end-user computing start with virtual end user computing, cloud hosted or data center hosted desktops and applications? Or did you at one point, were you working on PCs and traditional deployed computing solutions?
Last one. I'm not seeing only virtual desktops or terminal servers. I'm also seeing everything that the user is wanting to do on an offline mode, is doing locally. So I'm splitting the answer one more time into sections. Everything which is related to terminal server and VDI solutions, where we are mostly focusing on migrating every local stuff on a terminal server infrastructure, like unified communication solution, like a webcam conferencing solution, etc. And the other part where users wants to be still mobile, work from home, work from anywhere, but also work in an offline mode. And this offline mode is, at the moment, still a pain to realize on our operating system, because you need a couple of applications, a couple of stuff that you need locally to work with an internet connectivity. And that's pretty difficult.
Well, let me ask the question differently, because I didn't ask it correctly. That was my fault. And plus, you're coming from Europe, from Germany. And real quick, my story, I worked for a company called Deichmann Group here in the U.S., and they were using thin clients and Citrix in the late 90s when we were still running around installing off disk, literally disk, onto PCs and using Windows and endpoints and no middleware. Did you at any point in time in your career support a PC, a traditional PC deployed computing, no Citrix, no middleware, no nothing?
Sure.
Was that a point in your career at some point?
Yes, definitely.
And then what was the moment where you saw, virtual end user computing for the first time? And what was your experience when you saw, this delivered compute over some type of protocol, presentation protocol? That's kind of like the aha moment for most of us in the industry. And do you have one of those moments? What was it like to see the light switch go off, if it did go off for you?
It did. 2001, when my former boss came back with a MetaFrame 1.8 CD, came back to the company and started for the first time on a server, and showed us how to use applications that we were used to install locally on our data center. And I mean, at this time, everything was done manually, more or less. We had some Kix scripts that weren't integrated for the profile management and so on. But that was the first time where I had to face remote desktop services in general. And that was the first time where I was really amazed about seeing what we can do with a, let's say, less powerful hardware on the endpoint side, but more the centralized function on the data center level. It was the first moment. It was 2001, I would say.
That's funny, because mine's almost exactly the same, and I'll look at Doug and Chris and ask them too. But mine was my boss handed me the box, the MetaFrame box, purple and black and whatever, and said, "Here, I think this will work. Try this out." And that started my journey. And the first time I saw a session-based desktop or application really launch, I was like, "Oh, this makes so much more sense." I don't know why in the world we'd go around installing this stuff anywhere. But there's a lot of people. Most people still haven't had that aha moment, and many of them won't let themselves. They're historically been way too caught up on trying to make deployment solutions work. Which has its pros and cons. Doug, Chris, do you guys have a similar aha moment when you saw this happen for the first time?
Yeah, I do. I was just thinking about it. Hard to believe it's been, about 20 years. And so my story was, my wife and I had been living in the DC area. And when our son was born, we moved to Raleigh, where my wife is from, and kind of planted our roots here. And I got involved with an IT company for the first time. And I remember in some of the team meetings we had, I heard about this thing called Citrix off and on. I had no idea what it was, and I got a chance to see it live, and it didn't really click then. And then about 6 months after I started, I was added to a project team, and we began implementing our standard setup was, Windows 2000 server, 2000 Pro devices, and then we put in a Cisco PIX firewall. And then the engineer that I was working with, he set up these VPN tunnels, and then for the first time ever, we set up, the RDP access through that tunnel. And the light bulb went off for me when I realized I don't have to get in a car and drive 2 hours to this project we just implemented in Winston-Salem or Greensboro. And for Raleigh, I've done that trip so many times. I was like, oh my gosh, I can actually touch their stuff, manage it, do stuff. And this is amazing. And then we were able to hand that over to a services team, which then began taking care of a customer. That whole thing turned into an MSP practice that the company built after several of those projects went live. So that was that aha moment. I don't have to get in a car and drive somewhere because I can reach out and touch this environment. So that was me for my story.
So Doug, you've done podcasts on your stories. I think it wasn't all that dissimilar, right? Somebody handing you a disc and say, "Go play with this."
Yeah, I was walking out of the consulting company I was working for. It was like 5 o'clock at night, and lady that gave us all work orders and managed the engineers said, "Hey, Doug, drop off the system board." And I dropped off the system board, started talking to the engineer that, at the admin at the company. And he said, "Oh, you got to try this thing out." And he handed me WinFrame 1.6. And I took it home, installed it with floppy disk, right? And first of all, I argued with him. "No, I can't take this." He said, "Take it, you'll love it." Went home, installed it. Aha moment. I mean, back in the 90s, or even, even now in some ways, but to see that remoting of, Windows running on your machine, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I said, I went into the office the next day and told my manager, the engineer, SC manager at the consulting company, "Hey, have you ever heard of Citrix? It's so amazing. And can I do this?" And his response was, "Oh, if you can sell it, we can do it." So, I went out to every customer every customer I could talk to. Yeah. I told them about this crazy thing called Citrix until I could start deploying it. My first deployment was a funeral home, which was a whole different story.
We're good.
I watched the bodies being wheeled by me. Let's put it that way.
I would love to hear the use case for that one, man.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the one thing is I was there for about 3 days doing the deployment, and then I showed it to them everything, and they tried to print, and it wouldn't print DOS graphics. In the early days, WinFrame wouldn't print DOS graphics, and I said, "Is this a problem?" And they said, "This is a showstopper. We can't move forward." I was like, "Okay, cool." I packed up my stuff and got the hell out of that funeral. So I didn't complain or anything. I was quite happy to leave.
So that is interesting. You brought up printing because that is I think that's the first technical topic we're going to cover. And I know people may think it's boring, but companies still print, and it can be showstoppers if you can't print. So that's the first technical topic we're going to cover in 2 weeks. But I'll give you guys another good story along those lines. I have a new company we've started. It's a hyperconverged company that we've come up with here. And my partner in that company, I did a demo the other day and labbed up our solution and tied it into Citrix Cloud. And I had him launch a desktop from the Citrix website for the first time the other day. And he's never seen that before. He worked for a company. He's 40-something years old, and he'd never seen a virtual desktop before. And he just starts giggling about how awesome and how powerful it is. So every time you see somebody experience it for the first time, that's not somebody who's truly open-minded to the concept and understands the pros and the cons, watching their eyes light up when they go in, this is phenomenal. I've needed this forever. That I still get excited. It's like your kids opening presents. It's a similar type of feeling.
Hey, Andy, I got a question for you. Being an integrator, talking to so many customers, you mentioned pros and cons. There are so many pros and cons of centralized computing, virtualized computing, or whatever you want to call it. Do your customers get that in this day and age, or do you have to explain it to them, and then do you have to explain it to them multiple times?
Well, I'll say it like this, and I just had a kind of an interesting call last week with a really good customer of ours. They've been a customer of mine for roughly a decade now. Most virtual app and desktop implementations fail. Maybe fail's the wrong word. They come up short compared to what they really wanted to accomplish. And most of the time, it's not the technology. Most of the time, it's not Citrix. It's something along the way, which, Sebastian was talking about a while ago, IGEL becoming, version 2.0, where we're trying to solve more of those challenges. You can't totally rely on the middleware and the back end. And Doug, most of the time it's conceptual stuff. A situation the other day where a customer is trying to roll out something new, and they're trying to combine that with the use of a new tool within the technology. And my comment was, don't do that. roll out the solution the way you know how to do it and the way you know to be successful, make sure that works for your users, and then add in the new tool that optimizes it for systems management. Don't try to do both at the same time, because you won't know what to blame. You'll be blaming everything, and truthfully, you have created a soup that you don't know what tastes bad in the soup. You're just saying the whole soup's bad, which isn't true.
Well, that's what separates the good integrators from the bad integrators, the good consultants from the bad consultants.
Well, and I'll add one piece to that. That was actually my consultants that were doing that with them. The problem was at XenTegra, what we tried to do is we've tried to develop a team where from the top down, we all have ideas and concepts, and we want to holistically talk to the customer, not just have the customer talk to one of our engineers and tell the engineer what to do. We want to have at least quarterly meetings with our customers to talk about, hey, what are you trying to accomplish? And let me tell you about the other 10 clients who failed doing the same things, and try to keep you out of that same trap.
To me, it's always about setting the proper expectations.
I recently onboarded a new partner, and they're thinking Citrix, oh, that's easy. I'm like, no, this is the hardest thing you'll ever do. There's so many decision points and things that you have to accomplish and attack. So, taking that back to, you guys over at IGEL 2.0, right? That's the new thing you guys that's the evolution of IGEL. It's more worldwide. It does more marketing, and you guys are trying to solve more of the challenges that you see in the whole solution need, not just the old thin client story, which kind of brings it back to my comment to Sebastian earlier. What are you doing working for a thin client vendor if you want to go do fun and exciting things? It can be fun and exciting. Sebastian, what would you say the number one thing you guys are trying to fix for your customer base? Chris, Doug, Sebastian, any of you guys?
I would say for the moment is to solve this damn COVID situation, working from home, installing ICGs all the time. I mean, for the moment, we are mostly implementing solutions that we already implemented 3 years ago, more or less, with the UD Pocket and the Azure Cloud Gateway. But the main challenge at the moment, at least from my region, isn't the marketing anymore, isn't to convince people that we're not a thin client vendor anymore, but is that we are not the thin client or the operating system vendor anymore that is working inside of a company, inside of the company network, but also able to work in home office situations and telework situations, everything which is related to the actual pandemic situation. And that's where I have the most issues to find the time, because every customer is different, every network infrastructure is different. And even if the product itself is quite easy to understand and easy to implement, it's quite tough to get the customers onboarded, because installing our part is done in, say, 10 to 20 minutes from the SCG perspective. All the rest is already there. From the access to the remote desktop, to the Citrix environment, that's where most of our customers are having more issues, because they don't have a Netscaler in place. They have everything in place for company inside workers, but not teleworkers. So that's where I'm seeing at the moment my biggest challenge.
So I have a question for you guys on that topic. So, and I want to come back to like collaboration. We may have talked about in the last podcast. It's the big next step for most people in a centralized virtual compute world to overcome true collaboration without having to jump in and out of the virtual app or virtual desktop. But I did have a question for you guys based on my comments earlier around my company I worked for 20 years ago being all in on the European side, but not on the US side. In this uptick of remote computing, did you guys find as a worldwide company that the other cultures, other areas of the world were more easily ready to adopt this because they had been progressively thinking for a long time, and the US had to jump in and try to figure it out, or was it similar across the globe?
So just a comment on that. I think earlier this year, when the lockdowns and everything began we began to notice from a cultural perspective that in Europe, the concept of working from home was in a sense, in many respects, foreign for a lot of folks. I mean, they were just used to going to the office, and so this general idea, even though technically it wasn't internet was everywhere. I mean, it wasn't a problem, but they just weren't used to that concept, and so that whether they were accessing a virtual environment or not, just that general idea of I can work here or technically anywhere I have the internet. That was a cultural change, not so much necessarily here in the States, although it was, for a lot of industries, obviously, with kids home and parents, everybody's home, that was a bigger challenge, just adjusting to that. So.
Yeah, what I've seen is the same. Prior to COVID, it tended to be business focused. Norway, Sweden, decentralized. With all this land, the offices were in, let's say, Oslo, and the remote offices are spread across this giant country, and so that's set up better for something like a remoting solution, a Citrix style solution. COVID, I think it was a giant rush for people to figure out how to do this, and something like a Citrix or WBD or VMware or what have you, really, and they heard about it. It's a mature technology now, so they definitely rushed to it. But Chris is definitely right about the cultural aspects. Me being a transplant, someone that's moved here to Europe, it's quite interesting to see the differences, between Europeans and Americans when it comes to, really, I summarize it this way: is in America we live to work. We work. We love to work, or whether we love it or not is argument. You can argue that, but in Europe they work to live. So it wasn't about working remotely. It was about doing your job and then turning off the computer and living your life.
So I think here's where my misconception kicked in on that question. And if I go back to my 20 years ago knowledge of the companies, the European company used virtual computing, but inside the four walls of the business, and they weren't trying to use it for remote access systems. My company that I work for here in the US used PCs and deployed computing within the four walls of the business, and they used Citrix for remote access. Would it be fair to say that in the US we think Citrix is for remoting, but in Europe Citrix or virtual computing is for remoting, but in Europe they take it as the main way of getting work done, even inside the organization that maybe lends itself to remoting, but it was more of a mainstream thought for corporate computing. Is that fair? Is that what you guys see?
I would agree on the last part, definitely. I mean, most of the customers I'm looking at are used, like Chris already mentioned, are used to work in their office, but all the remote access would be done then with a VPN client, not with a NetScaler, like an example. And same stuff for other terminal server or VDI solutions we are facing. So at the moment, even on IGEL, I don't want to say too much about the internal change we made also from the IT process, but working from as a teleworker wasn't implemented before, I would say, 3 years ago, something like that. You had to work from the office all the time. I mean, besides the fact that you're on the road and you're visiting customers, you're visiting partners, but the home office itself was more kind of a gratification, if you could do that this way. And that changed a lot, I would say, since April, March of last year. And we are pretty happy about that, even in Germany itself, because it allows you to do a way lot more and be more agile than you went before. So that's definitely a difference. I mean, I don't know so much about the American culture of working. I mean, besides the fact that I'm speaking with Doug and with some other US colleagues quite often. But I'm pretty sure that we will learn from each other a lot in that point of view.
Yeah. To add one thing, and this is something I realized for years now, is that in America, the workers are sort of tasked with solving a problem. And if that means they work later, or they create a script for it or what have you, they'll do that. In Europe, they're more apt to buy a tool to solve that problem. And so we see that across the board with other, especially tool solutions, right? Printing solutions, profile solutions. They were highly adopted in Europe more so than in America, because in America you just, okay, make this work, and the guy figured it out, right? Heaven help you if that guy left that company, right? But that's a different problem. So that's I've seen, and definitely a cultural issue, or not issue, but a cultural deal, I guess.
So Doug, that's amazing you said that, because I go back to this whole history of working for a European-owned company, but that was run in the U.S., but owned by a German-owned company. And we had a Unix administrator. The first time I saw Citrix, I showed it to him. He said, oh, whatever, I've got SSH. I've been doing Telnet. Well, I've been doing SSH all this time, Shell. I don't need that. I've, grew up on a mainframe. I've got, AS400 type computing. I don't know what the big deal is, but from a Windows guy, it was revolutionary. And then you said the same thing, or you said something that keyed me in on a conversation I had with him one time. I was talking about buying this product. Actually, it was Tricera to solve a printing problem within Citrix. And of course, the Unix guy, he said, well, I'll just write a script and do that myself. I'm like, okay. But I'm sure very much so the adoption of the products and to fix things in Europe versus some guy in the U.S. hammering out a script day and night to make it work. That's a good observation.
Job security.
Yeah. Well, it's in America you're on salary, right? So they expect to work, and we do work. It's back to work to live versus live to work, and it's definitely something I've noticed for 20 years now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, we're coming up on time here a little bit, but the whole point today was to introduce Sebastian, introduce the idea of this community-focused blog review that we're going to do every other week. Are there specific topics? I threw out one in the chat window a minute ago around collaboration always being a tough one. VoIP and real-time collaboration and video meetings and how you do those inside virtual desktops. In fact, I started my morning this morning with something similar. At 8:15, I got a partner of ours calling me asking about training videos through Citrix onto some type of IGEL endpoint and frame rates and processing power on the back end, on the endpoint side of that equation. But are there specific topics on the technical side of things that you guys want to cover as part of our podcast coverage over the next, I don't know, let's say next month? What can people look forward to us talking about?
I would just look. Yeah, go ahead, Sebastian.
I would do, if not already covered or already discussed, is speaking about unified communication and how different unified communication might interfere with each others if you're using different solutions at the same time, like Zoom, Teams, Cisco JVDI, meetings. That's coming quite often in the community. I'm not sure if Doug and Chris would agree, but that would be one topic I would like to cover.
Yeah, I think that interoperability, we definitely are seeing a lot of chatter internally with people trying to figure out, can we run both at the same time? We've got customers where they got to support, WebEx and Teams or Zoom or whatever, because maybe their clients or customer, whatever, are using different collaboration tools and figuring out what's the secret sauce to make it all work together. So I think that'd be a good topic for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think everyone slightly different.
If I could add, Sebastian just joined the community full time in January 1st, and one of his roles, which we're really excited about within IGEL, is to actually spot the trends with the technical trends that are happening within the IGEL community, within our customers, our partners. Right, we have something like 3,000 different customers and partners in the IGEL community. So he's on a daily basis interacting with these people, spotting that, hey, Zoom and Teams is an issue. Right, or it's something that they want to learn more about. This technology here, and here. So you definitely have the right guy, and what we know today might change tomorrow. So maybe Seb, maybe you can share a little bit about that, what you have planned there. Would that be okay?
Definitely. You mean today or for the next time?
Right now.
Right now. Just like a minute or two.
We could certainly lay out the schedule. I was just looking through the list of blogs on the community site. There's some great topics out there. One thing I think would maybe good is some of the authors out there. Ron Nair, who's on my team, has been contributing quite a bit, writing both technical things as well as providing solutions. And I definitely would love to have him join and maybe talk about some of the stuff. One in particular is, along with the community, we have our IGEL Academy, where we have formalized course training, stuff like that. But Ron sort of married the two together with regard to a particular topic, custom partitions, and he's kind of provided a solution. We've got that GitHub site where you can download the template, and then he's got an automation thing that we're starting to implement. Where I was playing with it this weekend, getting familiar with it, and firing up an Ubuntu box, going through step by step, having it automate, build, Teams, Zoom, Slack, whatever, and then, revert back to the snapshot, and then, rinse, wash, repeat. And it's actually quite cool. And so those are the types of things I'd love to get into the nitty gritty. And obviously those are skills that we would love folks to master, if you will. The more you do it, the better you'll be.
So yeah, That's what we'll do. And my main reason for bringing this topic up here, and Sebastian, we'll let you jump into Doug's question in a second, is to make sure this group, the three of you guys, know I don't want to dictate what we cover. I want you guys, and I want feedback from the community to tell us what they want us to cover, which blogs, and that's the whole goal here, is take a blog and dissect it. But I want the community and I want you guys to tell us what we're going to cover, and we'll cover the best we can. And if we get it wrong, we'll fix it. If we need to revisit part 2 and 3 along the way, every so often we will. It's just a different medium to get the content out. Sebastian, did you have? Well, first of all, Doug, did you call him Seb just now?
Yeah, sometimes it's difficult for me to say. Well, I have no clue how to say his last name, so I was enjoying you pronounce it. So my name's Doug Brown. How simple is that? Right?
That's white bread American right there.
But Midwest, born and bred, 35 and I-80 is exactly where I was born and raised. So smack dab in the middle of the country. So to come over here and try to pronounce something like, I had to pronounce it with a little bit of a French accent, Sebastian. So
it's nice too. I like it.
Christian. Yeah, it's a Christian, not Christian. Christian.
All right. Well, while we're on the topic, Seb, do you want to go through how you got that name, and everybody's struggling with pronouncing it? Talking to a German with some French in there, and you don't have to go into a lot of detail, but just the origins of what we talked about prior to the call and your name and where all that comes from.
Yeah, sure. So his name Perusat is coming from France. So my father came from Bordeaux, which is near the Atlantic coast, near, I don't know, there is a movie called Das Boot, which might be more well-known in Germany maybe, but it's a submarine movie, and the submarine movie took place in La Rochelle, and that's approximately where my father came from. It's a region also where we get this nice red wine called Bordeaux and Médoc. And my mother is coming from Germany, so we spent a couple of years in France, a couple of years in Germany, and I moved back from France to Germany when I was 18. And this is just a short summary, but the name is coming from France, and I'm speaking both languages, I have both nationalities, so it gives a lot of advantages if you lose your driving license in Germany, because you have still a French one, but that's another story.
Do you have both passports?
I could ask for both if I would, but at the moment I still have my French one.
Oh, interesting.
And being a small-minded American in our 49 states or 48 states plus the 2 off somewhere else, I just don't think about nationalities the way you do in Europe, where a couple hundred miles gets you into a whole nother country and a whole nother group of people that for hundreds, if not thousands of years spoke a different language. I've never been to Europe.
Well, the other piece, Andy, it's not a couple hundred miles, it's a couple hundred kilometers, right? So it really throw you for a loop. You say miles, they know what you're talking about because they watch them, because they're not idiots, But when they say kilometers, we are like, what? Huh?
Yeah.
Well, try doing the speed limit in kilometers, translate that, and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm getting a ticket.
Well, Doug, and this is way off topic, but Doug, you grew up in the U.S. and in your grammar school days, they told you need to learn this metric stuff because within the next year or two, we're all switching over. We still got miles and standard units. Hand me the 10 millimeter socket. I mean the quarter-inch socket, so I can work on my BMW. Wait a minute, that doesn't work. Was
there a plan to move from to the metric system? Really?
Yeah, in the 1970s, it was a government initiative for the entire country to move to the metric system, and they taught. I remember in school, they said, "Okay, this is the way it's going to be." And you need to learn it, and they were strict about it. They taught it and everything, and finally, the Americans, being the way we are, the revolutionaries that we are, just said no, we're not going to do it. And finally, the government gave in. But it was truly
what the end result was on that? If you guys remember the Hubble telescope when it went up, it was producing blurry images.
Yeah.
My understanding is the story on that was the development was sort of a joint European-American sort of thing, and it turns out that one was doing stuff on the metric system, one was doing it, and they realized, oh crud, that's why we're getting blurry images. So the astronauts got sent up to fix it.
The same with the first European lander on Mars. Is it crash landed, and why? Because there was a joint project between the proper Europeans and the British, and the British did something in the British system, whatever that is, and the Europeans did it in the metric, and there was a small little conversion issue in the chute or whatever they used to slow down the device and land safely on the planet, didn't kick off in time, and in return a crash.
You mean that could be the reason for the Brexit, right?
That's a whole different problem. That's why I don't call them proper Europeans anymore.
And let's tie this all back to this IGEL conversation. IGEL was kind of a German European thing, right? And now it's becoming a worldwide phenomenon in terms of thin clients and thin client operating system, which that's a whole nother topic right there, is software defined, which is what IGEL really is, which is what makes it sexy, not the hardware. But the standardization on management and the concepts and the community, right, Doug? I mean, a big part of the community is taking the knowledge and spreading it across the world versus the way it used to be even 2 years ago, where all the IGEL knowledge was just pent up there in Germany, other than Kalberg and Feige. If you know IGEL, you know who I'm talking about. But other than those two guys, all the knowledge was pent up there in Germany, the community. And what we're going to do here is a great way to kind of unleash that and become more worldly in general, and specifically around the IGEL Linux software-defined operating system that runs on commodity hardware.
Yeah, I think what really changed. I was here when the company. Sebastian can maybe say a bit about this too, but I was here right when when Jed came in, or I came in about 6 months after him, and IGEL did not change. The technology did not change per se. What changed was the message. And what we did is, what Jed brought was, hey, this is what we do. This is what the Germans created. This is what the software that we have. He decoupled it from the hardware. He told a story, right? And now in return, someone who doesn't play with it or truly get it because they're not exposed to it could say, wow, that's interesting. Let me look at this. And it's always been, and Sebastian, maybe you can comment on this, and definitely Chris can too, is that when a customer sees this, when someone sees this, it's sort of like that aha moment that we talked about with Citrix, is that they look at this and they're like, oh my God, I can really do this? Yeah, you can really do this. And let me show you this. And then they're hooked.
Hey, and Doug, and to boil that down simply, and this isn't the right answer, but you mean I can do that and I don't need Windows on the endpoint? That's the very tactical aha, but there's a lot more to it than that, and we're going to get into that here. But go ahead, Sebastian, Chris.
I was just wanting to add that this major change happened, and it was tough. I mean, at least for the German-speaking part, because we were, let's say, a little bit more shy. We were this North German, let's say, quite silent kind of company, and the switch to this more marketing-driven but also solution-driven company was a bit tough. And I must say, at the beginning, it was tough for me too. But since we were successful with the strategy, and even the German customers, Central European customers like France, like Switzerland, Austria, etc., accepted that message, but also enjoyed that message that much that this disrupt events, a thing that I would never think that it could be successful, even in 10 years. Now, customers are complaining that they cannot join Disrupt anymore because of the pandemic, but not saying that they wouldn't join because the message is not there, or the content is not there, it's not interesting enough. It was just a fun and extremely interesting experience that we made with the last 3 years of IGEL, and it was really a tough change for all of us.
Yeah. Hey, And really, like Doug alluded to, IGEL had an amazing thing that we kind of have added some marketing and some sales to, and made it more worldwide. And I'll hesitate to say Americanized it a little bit, but maybe Americanized it a little bit. And Sebastian's shaking his head.
Yeah, sure. It's true.
I'm going to ask you a really weird question here. Any sense of resentment to what's happened. Like you got this beautiful IGEL thing that was kind of yours, right? And I'll tell you my story real quick. I live in an area of the country. I live in the Lake Norman area of Charlotte, North Carolina. Amazing place, 600 miles of shoreline inside the state. I've been running around in boats since I was, 12 years old, just having my way with the area. And all of a sudden in the past 20 years, a million people, not necessarily a million, but a lot of people have moved into this area. And my new neighbor the other day said something to me because he could tell how passionate about what I am about how it was 20, 30, well, heck, at this point, 40 years ago. And he said, hey, you know what? Do you resent us at all? And I stopped for a second. I was like, well, I can either lie or I can tell the truth. I'm like, absolutely. So where I live was awesome before you got here, and everybody else, you live here 5 years and all of a sudden you act like you've been here all your life, which is fine. But I do kind of resent it a little bit. And Doug may be doing the same thing in Germany, trying to own the place. But Sebastian, let's just, this is for fun. This is community. What are the things that have, any resentment to what's happened to this beautiful little German IGEL thing that now has, blown up, and we're doing conferences all over the world, and all the community is growing up around it. Any I don't want to call it, any resentment, but I don't mean like a derogatory resentment, but any type of, anything happened that has changed the culture at all? And Doug, we may have lost him in the middle of all that. He just hung up on me. Right?
If he pipes up, then maybe he just lost it, but I think we lost him. I'll answer that, because one of the things that, I've always been interested. I started coming to Europe in 2003, and I started learning about the European culture, and I created a lot of friends that shared with me the European culture and the differences between the two. And what I've seen is, at first there was this, wait a second, these loud, obnoxious Americans come in and start telling us what to do, but I think, we definitely, Jed definitely proved to, the IGEL folks, what we're doing is good and the company's growing. But you always have the people that, in any situation, that see it as positive and get on that wagon and run with it. And then the people that are looking for hey, I liked it the way it was. So it's, it depends on who you talk to, you'll get a different answer. But it's been an interesting. I think we've gone through a couple cultural shifts at IGEL, which is a whole different conversation. Yeah. And that's actually, if you ask me, that's my favorite part about the company so far, is watching that change.
It went way more professional. Sorry, Chris, go for it.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, because I just got a couple minutes I got to drop, but I will say in the last year or so, I've seen as we've grown and Jed became CEO a year ago, they've done a really deliberate job of trying to bring the company together on a regular basis, especially now as we meet. We have, I think it's monthly town halls now, and they do a great job of, being sensitive to the fact that, not everybody's speaking English as their first language. And so they'll go through a section of a presentation, and then we'll pause, and then somebody will provide that in German. And it's honestly fun to listen to be honest. I wish I could speak it, but they've done a really good job, I think, of recognizing the cultural things that we do and trying to make sure we're all kind of on the same page and sensitive to that. So I applaud them for their efforts there.
All right. Well, Sebastian, you're still on, and we kind of jumped in and started answering. We lost your video in that, so we thought maybe you were disappeared on us. Any specific things about the culture that's evolving, maybe changing, and maybe not resentment's the right word, but evolving, that you would really highlight, that you've noticed?
Sure. We had this big change, and the big change also happened in the communication. I mean, I'm thinking back in 2016 when we first agreed to use Teams as a collaboration tool inside of the company. That changed a way of communicating, from Teams chats, from Teams channels, from conferencing solution. I mean, before having Zoom as a preferred solution for bigger audiences, it was the first time where we could meet virtually inside of our teams, inside of our countries. And that was one of the biggest change we had. And that happened also in the team. And that's let's say, building new bridges between countries, between different cultures, because we are seeing more of some private events, some private stuff also from colleagues we never saw before, because we didn't have the chance to communicate through a collaboration tool, but more via email. And via email is just a question, getting an answer, and then starting a mail thread. But at the moment, it's really a close communication over the different countries.
Yeah. And I'm sure companies are struggling with that, worldwide. I mean, you guys have been doing that in Europe for 100+ years, where you learn to communicate and work with each other with cultural and language barriers. In the U.S., it's just been North Carolina versus Texas, which doesn't take much to overcome. It's there. Don't get me wrong. It's there. But watching you guys evolve over there. So, guys, we're about to wrap up here. Doug, any parting things you want to bring up about what we're trying to accomplish here with yourself and Chris and Sebastian going forward with the every other week IGEL community coverage?
Not really. I know I'll say a couple things, actually. First of all, Andy's tried to get me to do a podcast for a couple years, so he sort of backdoored me into this. I don't know how he managed to, but I'm really looking forward to it. So this will be really great. The other thing I'd like to say is Andy keeps mentioning the blogs, and we do have the IGEL community blogs, but that's really a small, that's like a 0.1% of what's going on within the IGEL community. So, if you're interested in IGEL, definitely join the IGEL community, because you'll find so much more information inside Slack than what we're able to share on the blogs.
Including a bunch of like-minded individuals that are passionate about the product, or want to get more information. It's kind of like the number one thing that's positive about the pandemic is that we all have something to talk about now. If you show up in the IGEL community, you'll have something to talk about because everybody's there for similar reasons, right?
It's quite amazing. Sebastian is really, he didn't join the community because he thought, he was a community-minded guy. He joined it to see what the heck was going on. But Seb, can you just real quick give your view on it? What's going on there?
In a second. I'm not in any kind of social medias. And the first time we heard about the community on the IGEL Disrupt or IGEL Kickoff at the moment, I was thinking, oh no, please not one social media stuff again, like everyone's social or whatever. And I joined because I saw that there was a little bit more technical content as we do on other social media platforms. And I joined, and I'm feeling now like talking to people like on some events at the bar. So I'm speaking to tech people, they're speaking to me, and we are speaking about tech stuff and not marketing, not sales stuff, but really just technical stuff. And that's where I'm here, and why I'm happy to help. I'm happy to moderate some questions, even if I cannot answer everything. I'm really amazed about that stuff, because it's not a social media. It's a communication platform for tech people over the world. And I'm really enjoying it.
It's a lot of fun. What's interesting is like 30% of our posts are not questions. They're just people chatting with each other, or proselytizing about something or whatever. I don't know. Is that a right word? But
well, and look what's happening. I mean, Sebastian mentioned hanging out at the bar, hanging out, disrupt. Those things can't happen right now. So the timing of the community, Doug, we'll make that we'll give you all the credit in the world for that. You must have known the pandemic was coming, but it worked out.
Well, the pandemic came in our third year, which was actually sort of lucky in the sense that we were a little bit more mature. We had the right staffing. Guys like Seb were fully on board doing his thing. But we've been around for a while. But we definitely saw a spike, because we are the new conference, right? Community is the new conference. Podcasts are the new conference.
So Doug, I could go down a really long, deep rat hole with this one, but just a yes or no answer. You have, since the first time you saw a Citrix type solution, known in the back of your mind the day was coming where something like a pandemic was going to happen and this was going to become extremely useful and valuable. Would you agree that that's always been in your mind, that something was going to make this thing become extremely viable and necessary?
No, of course not. Yeah, I just figured people would get it.
No. I from day one thought something was going to, and big snowstorm, hurricanes, all those things that happen.
Zombie apocalypses
was there. All right, Sebastian, thanks for joining. We'll see you in 2 weeks, if not sooner. I think we're going to cover a printing related blog, and we'll believe it or not, we'll have a good time talking about printing inside a hosted virtual desktop world. And I'm sure this group will somehow manage to find a way to fill up a complete hour talking about printing. I have absolutely no doubt.
I'm excited. Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Right. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks, Andy, for putting this together. This is fun.